Hi, Anna. This is Jeff Allen. Just saw your post about the Global Language Advocacy Day and the comments about should would it be appropriate for what would parents think if their children were not allowed to speak their native language in school? Um, Now I want to talk about that from the perspective as someone has worked for the past 30 plus years on supporting the less privileged languages. I'll say that, and I've worked in major languages that put my food on my table, and that's my thing. But supporting the less privileged ones, and I did work in dialectology. In my This goes back 30 years and 30 years ago, and I remember being in a dialectology class in the University of Lyon in France, and one of the teachers said that he had students even just within that decade that had remembered being punished by the school and even their parents for speaking the local patois, the town patois kind of dialect. I got a whole video about what is a language, and I've got a whole one about that. But it's called a local variety, okay? Local town variety to push the children to speak French in school and at home, even punished. And there was a thing where there was actually a punishment was there's a wooden toy or wooden something, an object that was given to the student, and it was passed around to whoever spoke it, so that the last one would get punished and get slapped with a stick, at the end of the day. Um, and even parents did this. It wasn't just the school. This is what I think. This is the one thing is that we need to be careful with anachronism. And I will cite the book from. I will cite the book. I will cite the book. In fact, I got it right here. Got it right here in my pictures, and it's from Lucien Lefebvre, Life in Renaissance France, a book that was published in 1979, and it was 79 by Harvard University Press. And I'm going to read the statement from it. I got it on my phone because I use it so much here. I got to go get it. It's one of my first ones here. And it says here that anachronism is the greatest enemy of the historian. This is on page 14, X1V, not 14 in Arabic numerals, but in Roman numerals, X1V in this book. Anachronism is the greatest enemy of the historian, who must always fight against the tendency to assume that things then were as things are now. And he gives a bunch of examples. But what that means is we shouldn't think that the way that we think that things should be now are how they always have been. And actually, they are in bad in the past. Because you know what, in the past, if we look back in history, history is full of examples of schools punishing children for speaking their local language, their local tongue. And the parents have done the same thing, pushing the children to speak the language that has been imposed by some power. Um, France did this from 1531 or 34, from the beginning of French, François François the First, with a kind of banning Low Latin in favor of French, and it was 1531 or 1534 as a mandate. Look at we can look at all the example Catalan. You got the same. That situation there with Catalan versus Castilian and all that stuff. Look at the examples in the United States where all the immigrants that gave up their languages during the Industrial Revolution in order to favor the melting pot. Okay, the American dream, right? The American dream, but the melting pot that caused them to all lose and give up their languages in favor for English so that they could all mix in. Same thing. That was the parents that did it. That wasn't the schools. That was the parents that did it. The parents told the children to stop speaking the languages. Um, uh, uh, so there are more examples. I think I think we need to to keep in mind that much of the history was not. And I could go back and cite tons of examples of I deal with the Caribbean languages, which is my specialty. and language in Africa, but language in the Caribbean, and where children are, forced to learn to go to school and be educated in a language that is not the one they speak at home. So they have to stop using it in some way, um, or have to be educated in one. And so they have to, it's sometimes called diglossia. They're kind of living in two different worlds, one in the oral world and one in the written world. And lots of countries in Africa. I mean, I could begin citing this. I don't want to go on and on and on, but I want to, this is the situation where, you can have multiple languages that children will speak or deal with or whatever, depending on the context. And then school one, and then I can, cite context in Ivory Coast and Gabon and Cameroon and Nigeria, and I'll go on. I could go on. I could even, talk about my adopted son's, when he was born in Djibouti, Africa. All kinds of things. But these are, and talk about in Algeria with the Berbers, and I mean this could go on. But what I think is really important here is, you made a call to the parents. What if the parents, what did they say if their children were not allowed to speak a native language? What if the parents are the ones that are always doing it? That's my challenge. What if it's for socioeconomic reasons that they want their children to no longer use that language that they speak at home, and force them to actually speak another language for school, and the kids grow up using that more major language between themselves, because the parents are forcing them to abandon it. Um, and I'm not saying that's good. Okay, I'm not saying that's good. I'm not trying to advocate we should do this. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. Um, but this is the reality. This is a reality that has happened in many, many, many countries in the past and continues to happen today, and will continue. If this is what the people, the parents want. Okay. This is, I mean, Alaskan languages. I've been advisor for the Alaskan language stuff and the Native Alaskan language too, and all that. And same thing, situations. Okay, same situations. And I don't have an answer right here. I don't have an answer. I'm not saying I've come with an answer, but I've come with at least a thing to help us reflect and think upon and think about. This is widespread. Um, and this is one of the reasons why, it's stated, and I don't have any empirical evidence, but I hear it, that basically a language, let's say a language variety dies. It disappears every 2 weeks on average. There are over 7,000 languages per day. I think I saw the last figure was 7,134 a couple days ago. Yeah, just over 7,000 languages for 8 billion people in the world. And I think that this is but what happens when parents start, being the ones that are the motivators or the reasons for which the children are not encouraged to speak it anymore, or learn learn the writing of it, learn the written form of it, which is a second language acquisition kind of thing, not a first language. It's not a first language, is just the language you actually speak, right? But if that, so what happens when all this? What are the parents' other reasons, and not just the schools? Because sometimes we blame the schools, and I'm trying to get at this here. It's not always the schools, especially, well, and this is where you get into the difference between education and literacy. And I want to make a distinction between that, because literacy can be where, children and parents learn to read and write of a language that they speak. And usually that happens starting with folklore kind of stories and stuff. And a lot of this happens too around even like translation of the Bible and literacy classes for that in traditionally oral languages. A lot of literacy classes so they can read the Bible. I'm not going to get into whether that's good or not, but there are a lot of literacy programs that are actually built around that to be able to support reading and writing of these languages that are not. They're not major. They're not major international languages. So, but again, what happens when the parent, and I've seen many cases even where diaspora, where I've seen people move, they emigrate, and they come to from African countries, and then they come to Europe, they come to France, and from the Congo, a different, and they don't speak the language of their kids anymore. They don't. They speak in French. They don't speak Congolese, whatever version of it is, to their kids. I know lots of kids of parents that were born there and came as young children or as even adults and don't speak the language. Okay, so they don't pass it on to their kids. And if like one of the parents speaks it and the other one is, tell them not to speak it, this happens. I mean, this happens. It's not the school then. School's fault. It's the parents' fault. So I just, what about that? What about that? What it's when it's the parents started doing it. That's what I want to bring up is because it's not the school that's going to change things. It's the parents and the peers. Um, Everything about language learning is not about the schools. Okay, it's not. It's about parental influence and peer friends influence. Language and identity is all about that. It's not really about school. Okay, that's just another layer. But if children stop, my kids do not want to speak English with me because I'm just the only person speaking to them. So they're teenagers and they want to be identified with the dad that speaks different languages than around them. I speak the French too, but hey, I'm going to speak to my kids in English. I don't care who wants to say whatever. So I'm a minority in that kind of sense. And my children actually treat me that way. And they want to reject the English as early teenagers because they're in that language identity kind of thing, their whole identity crisis thing, and figuring that out. And so they're every time I speak in English, they're kicking me and stuff. And no, I'm not going to let them kick me, or I'm not going to let them say I can't speak. They're continue to force my native language on them because I want them to be able to speak in it. Is that good or not? That's the thing. Is that good or not? And there are some parents. Well, I know lots of parents that have given up on the parent that has immigrated in from another country, and now they need to be acculturated, so they give up that language, even if they got a really thick accent, okay, in the language. The kids don't learn the language of their parent that came from another country because they need to feel like acculturated stuff. So they feel, and even from English, I'm talking about English here, there's this acculturation factor. And that's where the parents don't pass it on to their children, or if the parents learn, and then the parents don't want their children to speak it. I've seen so many examples. This is crazy. And I'm speaking about English. I'm speaking about other languages from Congo and just lots of languages. Okay. What about that? What about that? That's my concern. Is if your parents and your peers are making fun of you about speaking language, then you'll stop and you'll speak another one. School, you can get around it. You can get around that. But what happens when the motivation is coming from a much more personal thing? That's my thoughts. Again, I'm not saying it's good or right. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not. I'm just saying I'm kind of provoking that because I giving some thought-provoking things because I've seen this happen more at that level. So what do you think about that? That's where I'm concerned. I've seen for the past 3 decades.